सांजोआ राजपूत घराने से हूँ और मेरे खानदान की रगों में हमेशा ही फौजी खून रहा है।
उस वक्त मैं हिंदुस्तान को एक अंग्रेज की नजर से देखता था।
अंग्रेजों का नमक खाया हमने, उसे खारिज कर दूं मैं? लेकिन जब नजर साफ हुई तो मेरी समझ में आ गया, आजादी के लिए लड़ने वाली अगर कोई फौज है तो उसका नाम है आजाद हिंद फौज।
खानदान दी पग तार तार करके हुण रिश्ते गिना रहे हो।
You are charged with Indian Army Act Section 41, waging war against the king.
कसमें खाई थी कि अंग्रेजों के खिलाफ लड़ेंगे, चाहे खुद की जान क्यों नहीं चली जाए। अंग्रेजों के खिलाफ हम तीनों साथ लड़े हैं, मुकदमा भी साथ ही लड़ेंगे।
Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I am Vishal Dahiya. Today we will be discussing the ceasefire violation by Pakistani Army on the LOC in Jammu and Kashmir. There's been a lot of action in the past few weeks on the line of control between India and Pakistan in Jammu and Kashmir. According to Indian Army, there were 23 incidents of ceasefire violation by Pakistani troops, 1 border action team attack and 2 infiltration bids in June. The month of July also witnessed over a dozen ceasefire violations by Pakistani Army along LOC in J&K, in which 9 people, including 6 soldiers, have been killed and 18 injured so far. But it is the civilian population which has to bear the brunt of the escalation at the LOC. Around 8,000 people living in the border areas have been affected by shelling by Pakistani troops. More than 3,000 are now living in shelter in camps set up by the government in safer areas. Lives of hundreds of school children have also been put at risk, with almost 217 students trapped in their school buildings under heavy mortar shelling by Pakistani Army before being rescued by the local authorities and Indian Army. The heightened tension on the LOC has led to suspension of cross-LOC bus service between Chakkadabag and Rawalkot, which started in 2005. In a stern message conveyed by the top army brass, Indian DGMO has told his Pakistani counterpart that the Indian Army was sincere about maintaining peace on the LOC, but reserves the right to retaliate against any ceasefire violation. So what really is happening at the LOC, and what is the reason behind this ceasefire violation by Pakistani troops, and how will it affect the security scenario in the region? For this, we have with us in the studio a distinguished panel of guests. Let me introduce you to them, starting with Mr. Nitin Gokhale, National Security Analyst, a renowned journalist as well. We also have with us Mr. Vuvek, Katju, a former diplomat and former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs. We also have with us Major General retired Dhruv Katoch. He is also a security expert. Let me begin with you, Nitin, first. What do you make of this situation right now? It's nothing new. The ceasefire violation on the LOC is something which has happened in the past as well. But this time around, it is a sustained effort by the Pakistani troops in the past 4 to 5 weeks. And the numbers which are coming in from the army, from the government sources also must be a cause of concern. More than 2 dozen in June, almost 1 dozen by the middle of July.
Well, I think, as you said, this is not something new. If you look at the last 1 year, in fact, even before the surgical strikes happened in September 2016, this kind of infiltration attempts, the ceasefire violations have been happening. The 2003 informal ceasefire that has been observed between India and Pakistan is as good as dead, as we know. Yeah. And in the past 1 year, as I mentioned, it has been a sustained effort from Pakistani side to sort of break the ceasefire or at least have these violations going. But there are 2 reasons for this. Since 2014 or December 2013, Pakistani Army has decided to hit military garrisons all along the LOC. If you look at Uri, if you look at Tangdhar, Kupwara, Poonch, any of these places, Naushera, all those places where, and even inside coming to Nagrota, coming to Samba, and the police stations in Hiranagar or in Gurdaspur, the attacks have been there. To do that, they have to send people in to these areas, and to send these people in, they have to have this cover fire, and therefore the increased intensity of the ceasefire violations and shelling or mortar fire on Indian positions, so that under that cover many infiltrators can be pushed in.
So basically the old motive of ensuring infiltration.
There, and Pakistan has not been able to sort of overcome this fact that the Indian Army raided some of their administrative bases and launch pads in September 2016, and sort of it was a slap on their face. So this is one way of intensifying and keeping the Indian Army engaged, as well as
retaliating.
But from the Indian side also there have been quite a lot of retaliations. Their figures don't come out. We keep reporting it, but they have suffered much more major damage. In many cases, you would have seen one report in the Dawn newspaper where they spoke about some 800 people being killed, which I think is an exaggeration. But certainly the intensity from Indian retaliation has also been as high as the Pakistani ceasefire violation. So I think it's a battle of attrition and a battle of in the mind that is being played out.
Okay, so battle of attrition, battle of mind. Let me bring in General Katoch here. General, do you agree with what Mr. Gokhale is saying, that this is nothing but with the same old concept of ensuring infiltration 1 and 2, this is sort of a retaliation which the Pakistani army is indulging in after that surgical strikes which happened in 2016?
The first part of it, absolutely spot on. Because we are already in the month of July. We've got another 2-3 months. Pakistan is looking at that particular
before the
window.
winter
Just
starts
2 to 3
setting
minutes. Then the winter will set in, and it is very difficult to infiltrate terrorists across the line of control then. So the first part of it is, it has been a standard operating procedure as far as Pakistan is concerned, of using this tactics to divert the attention of the Indian armed forces which are deployed there and push these people in. The second thing is, I'm not so sure if they are doing it as a retaliation. No, I mean, I look at it, I look at this aspect totally differently.
Okay.
You see, what has happened is that once these people have started giving support to terrorists by firing, the Indian army is actually responding against them, against those posts. So now we are having a situation by which, when this firing takes place onto a Pakistani post for covering fire to the terrorists coming. Earlier we never used to do that. Now we are doing it. So what you're really seeing is now slight escalation in, what do you call it, in the conflict levels, right? This is the first level of escalation, and I think it'll keep escalating further. It is not going to go down.
Okay.
The moot point is, the way I've seen it is, that for Pakistan this has been a very low cost option. For the Pakistan army this has been a very low cost option of using sending infiltrators in. Now for the first time their army is actually being made to pay a price. As Nitin very correctly said, okay, they may not have suffered 800 dead, but it could be, I think it is certainly in the 3 figures. They've suffered very heavy casualties. And the Pakistan army, true to its shameless nature, they have actually not disclosed those figures, and they don't even tell their relatives and all that. The way they disowned the bodies of the Kargil, of the people who fought in the Kargil war, they are disowning these people too.
Okay.
That has been a ploy of the Pakistan army. I'm quite certain that they will continue to ratchet up the pressure. Accordingly, the Indian army will respond in a more reasonable and aggressive manner. And this ding-dong battle will continue for some time, till such time as Pakistan actually feels it cannot bear the cost.
Okay.
Until such, we have to wait for that particular moment when the Pakistan army says, okay, no more. And then you will find a decrease and you will find peace descending.
Okay, now that's a very detailed explanation which you have given, General Katoch. Let me bring in Mr. Katju here. Mr. Katju, we've had this picture of how things are placed in terms of security, in terms of the situation on the border. But if you look at it from a different angle, from a diplomatic angle, from a dialogue process which is almost at a standstill now between the two nations, is this going to be another impediment in ensuring achieving the long-term goal of peace at the border between both the nations?
I think we've got to place this in a somewhat larger perspective.
Okay.
The reasons that both my co-panelists have mentioned are absolutely correct. Specifically, the Pakistani firing is because they want to push in infiltrators. That's been an old thing going on for decades.
Okay.
But the larger perspective to which I want to draw your attention is their frustration at the international community's complete disinterest on all that they have been attempting in the Kashmir Valley for the last 1 year. I think after Burhan Wani's killing in July of last year, the Pakistanis went, if you recall, hyperactive in their rhetoric and their support to the agitation. And they expected that the international community will immediately be attracted to the situation that is in the valley and will bring about great pressure on India. In this, they have been very disappointed because the international community has seen through the Pakistani game.
And is now not responding in a positive
and has
manner.
not responded. I mean, they treat it as terrorism, and they know what the Pakistanis have been up to. Even as we speak, the Americans are engaged under Trump to devise a policy on how to deal with Pakistan in the context of Afghanistan. So, given this situation, I see this firing as a part of this entire package of keeping in somehow the situation in the valley alive. That the international community's focus must be on J&K. And I dare say when these accounts come out, some diplomats, as part of their work, the foreign diplomats, look at this and report. Because that is what diplomats do. I have been a diplomat and I can tell you that's what diplomats do. Now, the point is that while this reporting is done, it does not bother the international community, because what they are seeing is that India is being very restrained.
Okay.
Yes, there is an effective response at the border, which is natural. Any government would do so. But India is not wanting to escalate the situation. It is hoping that better sense will prevail on Pakistan, but I don't think that will happen. So I do think, as I think Nitin mentioned, this is a war of attrition, and it will go on. And my last point, just one more sentence. I think we've got to be prepared for a long drawn out thing, and make arrangements on the border so that our civilian populations are taken care of.
Okay, so it's once again you're also reiterating almost the same point from a different perspective. It's going to be a long drawn out thing. Let me bring in the one underlying perspective which everyone is talking about, the situation in the Kashmir Valley, as you know, Mr. Katju also pointed out that they're trying to go ahead and you know, portray themselves on a different platform right now. So something which they've not been able to achieve in terms of their international approach, or you know, putting the entire Kashmir thing in the international perspective. Is this one theory which is being pointed out, that what Pakistani army is trying to do right now is trying to show, or rather portray, their support for the secessionist elements which are active right now in the Kashmir Valley? Trying to show that yes, we are with you, we are there, we are supporting you. Is that also one of the underlying elements very important for the Pakistani army specifically, not the entire government but the army specifically?
Of course, I mean the Pakistani army's existence, major reason for its existence, its sustenance, the budgets that they get, you know, disproportionately high budgets in their
is Project
in
Kashmir.
the GDP is Project Kashmir. I mean, without Kashmir, the Pakistani army has no reason to really be as large and as dominant in the polity of Pakistan. Mr. Katju will know better. He has been, you know, sort of a expert on that politically and diplomatically. He's looked at it. But to my mind, the Pakistani army's sole aim, or the main aim, is to keep the turmoil and in Kashmir alive, keep it on the boil, and irrespective of whether the international community looks at it or not, its very existence, its budgets, are dependent on what happens in Kashmir.
What happens in Kashmir. Mr. Katju, once again to you, taking it a little bit forward, is this also sort of reflecting on the internal situation which is happening, which is going on right now in Pakistan, with the Prime Minister being seized on a corruption issue, the army once again trying to, you know, push forward its case, and on the border, if you escalate situations with India, you have a case that yes, you know, there is a tension on the border, we are the only ones who can keep you safe.
You know, I don't see it entirely correlated with what's happening on the Panama Papers case, which is going on even as we speak. The hearings are going on in the Pakistan Supreme Court. I think the Pakistani army acts autonomously of the civilian government. It has always done so. Pakistan's India policy is entirely under its control, and therefore it thinks that it must keep Kashmir under focus, if not of the preferably of the international community, but if they can't achieve that, then at least of the Pakistani people. So there will be a daily thing in the Pakistan press that the Kashmir, this entire litany of falsehood, that Kashmiris are being oppressed and that Pakistan must stand with them, etc. And that is a continuous feed to color their mind, because there are some people in Pakistan who ask, very few, but who ask that why this constant hostility to India, what is it getting Pakistan? But that is crushed immediately by these actions along the LOC.
Along the LOC. Let me bring in General Katoch here. General, what's your perspective on this, specifically with regard to the fact that this entire sector is really, really important to not Pakistan but the Pakistani army?
I have felt, in fact, this is my personal analysis, and I think over the coming 2 or 3 years we will actually see it unfolding. I think what the Pakistani army has realized is that they are losing the narrative in Kashmir. They are losing the narrative. Regardless of all the sound bites which emanate from there, regardless of the stone pelting, regardless of everything, I think they are getting the sense that they are losing the narrative. And they want to get hold of the narrative again. If you have noticed that since the beginning of this year, the focus on eliminating terrorists has been very, very well, I'll use the word focus. It has been very focused and very successful. And the number of resident terrorists, both in Kashmir and in Jammu, and in the Jammu division, in the upper divisions of Jammu, have reduced dramatically. Even in the Kashmir division, where practically 95% of them reside, they have reduced, they're going down and down. Now, what happens is, beyond a certain stage, if the terrorist strength goes down beyond a certain level, it is very difficult to re-establish that level of dominance which these people had. And I think they are losing that dominance. You will notice that, I'll just give it as a very small point. How is it that every 3 to 4 days an encounter is taking place by which 2 or 3 terrorists are being eliminated? Now, it is being very, very targeted and very focused. So obviously information is coming to the army. Where is that information coming from? It is coming from the police. Yes. Who's providing it to the police? It is being provided by the local population. So now we are actually getting down to the stage, regardless of what some people you may actually observe in the media saying. I think that there is a shift in the psychology as far as the people is concerned. This shift is getting more and more visible. And as it gets more and more visible, Pakistan will get more and more strident trying to maintain its
So the psychological shift in the local population is something which is irritating Pakistan's army brass. That's a very interesting point. But let me bring in a completely different angle now and to the present situation as well. If you look at it from the prism of China-Pakistan axis, and right now it's a very interesting situation. Indian army is in a standoff in Doklam sector against the PLA. Indian army is also facing incessant ceasefire violation by the Pakistani army in the Jammu and Kashmir, several sectors of Jammu and Kashmir. So is this just a coincidence, or is this something more to look into? Well, you had a lot of analysis on this, so that's why this very a lot of people are asking questions. Why now?
No, I think these two are separate, because the Pakistani focus on Kashmir has been there, relentless for the last so many years, and especially after this government has come to power, they've sort of upped the ante in Kashmir, and they tried to stir the pot in Kashmir itself. Well, China-Pakistan nexus is well known. In fact, now is the time when Pakistan, I keep calling in my talks everywhere, now Pakistan has almost become the 37th province of China. because of its dependence on China for everything. So I don't rule it out, what you're saying, the the nexus, but it is not done with some kind of a planning that we will sort of activate Kashmir or keep Kashmir boiling and then we'll activate a front there. It has its own dynamics. What's happening in Dolam Plateau, actually the name is Dolam Plateau, not Doklam is the Chinese name. Dolam is the Indian terminology. And they've done it for various other reasons. They do not want India to stand up to Bhutan. They want to bully the tiny kingdom. They also are angry about India's stand vis-a-vis OBOR, the One Belt, One Road initiative, India not joining it. And of course, they didn't expect such a robust response from India and as well as restrained response. In a sense, India has given only one official statement, whereas the aggressive and belligerent statements coming out of Beijing, they're much higher. So they are actually painting themselves in a corner and they will not know how to then de-escalate. That is the danger. But it's a completely different dynamic.
These are different situations.
Different situations. That's what I'm saying.
Mr. Katju, do you agree? Is this not a part of a Sino-Pak nexus? Some sort of element, some sort of combination working here?
No, what I'm seeing is that in some sections of the Pakistan media, and I think they are reflecting some sections of Pakistani opinion, official opinion, there's a certain glee at this standoff between India and China. And not only that, certain entirely false scenarios have been put out on their television.
They were very huge foreballs committed by the Pakistani media.
158, exactly. And interestingly, the Chinese denied it immediately. So they don't want all this. So that aspect is there. But I don't see a certain coordination between the Chinese, that standoff, and the LOC situation. I don't see that. There I agree with Nitin.
That's right.
This is something which goes on. Now, what will they do in future? I think the Chinese are wise enough to tell them that, look, you are small boys in this matter, keep away.
That's
okay. General Katoch, how do you look at it? Because, from the army's perspective also, you've been there, you've done that. Is this a cause of concern, if at all, this ends up being a Sino-Pak nexus, or if not now, then in the near future?
The way I look at it is, firstly, what Nitin and the ambassador have said, I totally agree with both of them.
Okay, so not now. This doesn't seem to be a combined strategy
it's
now.
It's not a combined thing. One thing I'm absolutely certain about, if China and India go in for a conflict, Pakistan will make use of that opportunity. But there is no way in which China is going to interfere if there's a conflict between India and Pakistan. You see, China is not going to get involved. They have got their stake separately. But the reverse also is true, that if we have a conflict with China, then Pakistan may like to make use of it.
But during this standoff, there were some Chinese reports mentioning that, on the same basis, India has walked into Bhutan. Chinese, a third nation army can walk into Kashmir also.
That's absolutely, you see, so a third nation can also walk into Tibet. I mean, you see, the arguments are endless.
Well then, yeah.
So we can keep, so these are semantics. And I think it is part of the psychological warfare, which Chinese are, they're very focused on psychological warfare. It is that first prong of the warfare which they always do. And they have applied it here.
Okay.
As Nitin said, and very correctly said, I think they were surprised by the Indian response. They didn't expect it to not just be robust, to be so restrained. And the very fact that by and large India has actually ignored all the vitriolic comments which are coming in the Global Times and from Xinhua, that the Chinese news agency, I think that has taken them totally by surprise. They expected something in Parliament, nothing of that sort is happening.
Okay, so
Nitin, even in the media.
Not even in the media. Even in the media.
Not even the
I
Indian
think
media.
it's very important.
Well, thanks. I must thank Mr. Katju for pointing that out. Yes. Quickly, we're running out of time. Nitin, if you can sum it up for us. Yes. And the most pertinent question is that how should the situation be looked at it right now is a different issue. But then where is it going? The ceasefire violation. Where is it going? Is it something which might escalate into, has the chances to be escalated or not?
No, I think we should not look at it in those terms, escalatory ladder. I think what General Katoch said is absolutely right. If India can continue to impose cost on the Pakistani army, and which it has done over the past couple of years, that is going to be a time when the Pakistani army will come down, because they do not have the firepower to sustain themselves. The ammunition is not endless. They do not have that kind of money to sort of spend, or even sustain the human losses that they are suffering. Even if it's not 800, I'm sure the number of casualties fatal in the Pakistani army is much higher than they've ever been.
Mr. Katju, in terms of diplomatic perspective, is it going to harm further the already harmed dialogue process?
No, the dialogue process, I think we made it clear and correctly, and I hope we'll adhere to it, that as long as Pakistani terrorism continues, there's no question of talking to them or resuming the full dialogue. But on this, on Pakistan's ability to sustain this militarily, while of course we've got experts here, I think the army has at least the drive to pay costs, but at least keep a semblance of this activity going on.
Okay. General Katoch, if you can sum it up for us.
You know, in my view, I think the first thing which India needs to do is, we shouldn't worry about escalation.
Okay.
We've got to protect our borders, and if it leads to escalation, so be it. Let the other party, that should be Pakistan's concern, not India's concern.
Not India's.
And every time we get concerned about escalation, I think we'll be on the back foot. So we shouldn't worry about it. We are okay. The Indian Army is doing a great job, and I think Pakistan is on the back foot as of now.
Okay, so that's it. It seems clearly, as our panelists were pointing out, that we should not be worried about the escalation on the LOC in Jammu and Kashmir. Our troops are definitely doing the good job, as good as they can. It is for the other side to go ahead and be worried about their losses and how long can they sustain it. We'll be back next week with a different topic and a different set of guests. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.